Welcome to the Hall of Generals, the place where we tell great wargaming narratives and carry them out on the tabletop. Today's episode is the third battle report for our overall campaign titled The War of the Three Heirs. If you haven't seen our first three videos, being our lore video and the first two battle reports, we highly recommend that you go back and watch those videos to see where the story is at. For convenience, we have put a link to the lore video and our first battle report in the description below. And with that, we move into the lore component for today's battle report, the sacking of Manispoke. With his success against the forces of House Burgess in the Battle of Greyscone, Prince Tamens conducted a forced march towards another town with the goal to capitalise on his momentum. He knew that while he had taken casualties, the city of Manispoke was city in name only and held by a lord whose forces had already been heavily damaged. Manispoke was nothing more than a set of glorified ruins being held by Lord Travis of House Wood. These ruins had been used as a defensive position to hold back both the tribesmen of the woods and the beasts of the mountains. Lord Wood had held these ruins for 10 years, with his fighting men being comprised purely of volunteers. They swore oaths to the Lord due to the great chivalrous deeds that the knight had carried out. To the south of Manispoke sat both the watchtower and the Green Chapel, the home to the Order of the Lady. While Lord Wood was not one to worship the Lady, in fact, stating many times being a man who didn't follow any faith and thought it to be foolish, a fact that the kingdom knew all too well, making him the black sheep at all court. He was still respected by those around him due to his martial prowess and refusal to surrender Manispoke. Word had reached Lord Wood that the forces of Tamens Bloodied were marching towards the ruins of Manispoke, and for the first time in many years, a sense of fear washed over his soul. He knew that he was heavily outnumbered, so he quickly sent a raven to request the aid of the great knights of the Order of the Lady. Leading into this battle, he knew that today was the day that Manispoke was to fall, but he had a responsibility to act as a delay for Prince Tamens and his forces of heretics. Today's battle report was played out with a fun scenario that was homebrewed, where the Order of the Lady is coming to the aid of House Wood. At the start of each of the Bretonian turns, a D3 was rolled to see if reinforcements would come into the battle. On the screen now, you can see both army lists, which actually includes some fun new additions to Tamens Bloodied, which includes Dragon Ogres. We actually use the Ogryn Myrmidon kit from Age of Sigmar due to their cool aesthetic, and a great beast of a Bone Grinder Giant that was given to me from a friend. This Bone Grinder Giant has given his services to the Heretic Prince in exchange for coin. For those who watched the Reclaiming Ascillion, our first battle report, the Giant is a member of the Brotherhood of Coin, the mercenary company that was seen in the first episode that has sworn their loyalty to the Successionists. And with that, let our battle report begin. Starting with the deployment of House Wood. On the left flank, a group of Knights of the Realm on foot are led by a lord of a minor house. They sit inside the ruins, taking cover from the enemy. Next to them sit a band of archers and the army's trebuchet. Lord Wood also takes command in the centre with his personal bodyguard, a unit of questing knights, with archers covering them from the roof of a nearby building. On the far right, a unit of men-at-arms, levy spearmen if you will, secure the right flank. Across the field of battle, The heretic and his forces sit idly waiting for war. The Knights of Filth took charge of the right flank, along with the Blue Hag and her bodyguard of Tazinchian warriors. In the center of the battlefield were the Chosen of Khorne. Either side of them sat a unit of marauders from the forest tribes. Prince Tamen and his new wife Helga sat next to them alongside a mass of halberdiers. Lastly, securing the flank were the dragon ogres and the mercenary giant. With the roll-off, we see that the heretic prince has taken the initiative. The army of chaos aggressively advances up the battlefield. The Knights of Filth rode forth with every intention of getting off an early charge to show why they had become so feared in the realm. The rest of the army continued to move forward, holding the prince's battle line to put pressure on the loyalist forces. Across the field, the ground could be felt tremoring as the boned grinder giant could be heard stomping forth, each step echoing throughout the ruins. Fear began to grasp the hearts of the defenders. The loyalist heavy infantry marched forward, readying to meet the enemy head-on. Both the archers and the trebuchet sat idly, waiting to fire at the oncoming enemy, knowing that if the loyalists were to win the day, they would have to whittle the heretic numbers down to improve their chances. Eager to earn their place, the peasant levies advanced forwards, hoping to damage the enemy forces. Lastly, with a smile breaking across his bearded face, Lord Wood ordered his men to ride forth and cut down the enemies. Glory was to be earned this day. The archers opened fire from across the battlefield at the Tazinchian heavy infantry. A whistle of flying arrows could be heard before they were burnt in the air due to the Blue Hag's sorcery. This was of little issue though, as the trebuchet lobbed a large rock at the marauders across the way. But in an unfortunate mistake of aim, the rock scattered into the Chosen of Khorne, killing over half the unit. To the shock of everyone, including the prince, his men stood true, refusing to flee. Lastly, Prince Tamen ordered his men to adapt the testudo formation as a barrage of arrows were released upon his men. The prince's orders and tactics were effective in not only saving his men, but his barbaric wife. Once again, the Chaos Warriors, known as Tamens Bloodied, advanced their forces forward. They knew that hails of arrows would be flying against them. This would be their biggest opposition as they advanced. Prayers could be heard by the loyalist forces, but not those to the lady. The prayers were more promises to the ruinous powers, chants of skulls for the skull throne, hail to the grandfather, all shall be changed for the Dark Prince. These screams of prayers, if you could call them that, rang through the air as the traitor forces advanced. The Blue Hag called out to the Lord Tazinch, begging for his powers and support in an attempt to cast a magical flame attack at the warriors across the field. But alas, the Lord of Change was not smiling on her just yet. Due to the long distance from the Green Chapel, the knights who rode as the Order of the Lady were delayed to the battlefield. This dearly disheartened the defenders of Manispoke. Once again, all the archers sat still, prepping to open fire on their enemy. The men-at-arms advanced forward in a phalanx of spears, shaking with fear, but not allowing it to control them. The foot knights knew that they would have to battle the Knights of Filth, so chose to advance out into the opening, jeering their enemy to come forth and face them. Lastly, in an attempt to inspire his men, Lord Wood let loose his battle cry, and he and his personal guard of questing knights charged the Chaos Ogres across the way. The archers once again attempted to open fire on the hag and her men. This time, the volley was more effective. The hag's magic was unable to protect her men, as the arrows killed 2 of her bodyguard. This was the first chink in the Tzinch warriors' formation. The trebuchet opened fire on the Tzinchian warriors once again, but this time it scattered, missing the heavy infantry. Knowing their weapons were useless against the 2 Studo, the last band of ranged troops opened fire with their allies against the lightly armoured marauders, killing a single man. In the inner right flank, Lord Wood slashed at the Dragon Ogres with his blade, landing blows but unable to do any significant damage. The beasts being too tough with their natural defences. Like their lord, the questing knights landed blows against the beasts, but they too were unable to damage a single dragon ogre. The great beasts swung their heavy axes in return against the knights, their strength truly showing as one of the knights were cut from shoulder blade to hip, their bodies splitting in 2. Another's horse was decapitated, and as it fell, it landed on the knight. Lastly, as a knight attempted to cover his head with his shield, the axe split both the shield and his arm into 2. Knowing this battle was lost, Lord Wood and his fellow knight fell back in good order. Once again, the Chaos line advanced, including 2 units charging the defenders. Firstly, the Knights of Filth charged the Loyalist foot knights, the heavy lancers, polearms and scythes aimed true. Oddly enough, their horses never neighed, the only sound heard coming towards the Loyalists being the galloping hooves and the clanging of metal armour. The Dragon Ogres looked at the battered questing knights and charged them once again. Lord Wood knew this would be a hard but necessary fight. Flames were seen coming from the eyes of the hag as she aimed her staff at the archers across the way. Suddenly, 2 of the archers burst into blue flames. The knights, being smaller yet more nimble, attacked the Dragon Ogres with their blades. Lord Wood struck one of the beasts, significantly damaging it with his blade. To the dismay of the Loyalists, the questing knights were only able to land glancing blows. The Chaos beasts retaliated by caving in the chest of one of the crusading knights with their axe, killing him within seconds. Once again, the knights were forced to fall back, as the Knights of Filth crashed against the heavy infantry of their Loyalists. Their weapons quickly cut down the knights on foot. The battle being brutal, with 4 of the Loyalists being cut down from the charge. Not a single heretic knight fell. The Loyalists fled from the knights, who decided to reconvene and charge into the archers. As the battle looked like it had already been lost for the Loyalists before it truly began, both the High Lord of the Order, accompanied by his personal guard of Grail Knights, and the Order's standard with a group of heavy knights rode forth to the aid of House Wood. While those on the battlefield were inspired by their reinforcements, the foot knights fled the battlefield, not wishing to face their enemy. The men-at-arms advanced towards the enemy, while Lord Wood knew he had to slow these Dragon Ogres down to aid the Order, who would be left to fight this battle of chaotic forces. The trebuchet was set to open fire and continue to destroy those who were sworn to do the Loyalists harm. Unfortunately for the defenders, A bolt connecting the trebuchet together had not been secured correctly, and it snapped, piercing the brain of a member of the crew, rendering it useless for a turn. The archers who were perched upon the house opened fire once again on the marauders, killing another man. As the knights crashed into the dragon ogres, Lord Wood once again attempted to slash at his mighty enemy. These attacks landed true, leading to one of the beasts falling dead. Unfortunately, the beasts were too much for Lord Wood and his fellow questing knight, who was cut down in the battle. This led to Lord Wood fleeing in terror. On the left flank, things were dire for the archers. The Knights of Filth ran in and charged down. The heavy cavalry easily cut down every member of the archery band before reforming. Prince Tamens ordered his battle line to start rearranging itself to march towards the enemy coming from his right flank. His marauders and the Chosen of Khorne led the way with a wheel towards the oncoming Holy Knights of the Order, while the Dragon Ogres continued to pursue the fleeing general of the defenders.
3, 5, 4, thumb. The puny humans who oppose me will all be squashed under my thumb,
called out the giant as he charged his way into the peasant men-at-arms. Lastly, the Knights of Filth charged the Grail Knights, along with the High Lord of the Lady. With the chaos of battle coming in tow, the Blue Hag once again attempted to burn her enemies, but with a lack of concentration, her magic fizzled as the giant engaged with the peasant levies. He picked up a single man and squished him between his fingers and laughed.
Ha 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 ha! Your boys are squishy like insects. You will be crushed. Ha ha ha!
The peasants began stabbing with their spears, piercing the giant's leg, inflicting 2 wounds. Before the giant snapped with anger, he stomped on 4 of the peasant levies, killing them instantly. As the peasants fled the giant, declaring their efforts useless against the beast, the giant charged them down, killing them to a single man. The Knights of Filth charged into the Holy Grail Knights, and in a quick skirmish, a single Grail Knight was pierced with a lance, bleeding out while he still sat in the horse's saddle. The High Lord of the Order swung his morning star at the opposing knights, fear taking over, making him unable to kill a single knight. This led to the Grail Knights giving ground to the Knights of Filth. In the wake of battle, 2 units of foot knights came to the aid, their weapons drawn, ready for war. Lord Wood looked around the battlefield and knew in his heart that he needed to face the battle one last time. He rallied, ready for a final combat. Led by the Order's banner bearer, the Knights of the Lady crashed into the Zychian heavy infantry, and the Grail Knights moved away from the Knights of Filth. The archers in the house opened fire on the giant, and while the arrows were little more than toothpicks against the giant, one pierced his eye, inflicting a brutal wound. The trebuchet opened fire on the Khornite infantry, but to the heretic's luck, the rocks scattered, missing the warriors. As the Knights of the Order crashed into the Zychian heavy infantry, Two of the Chaos Warriors were pierced with lances, splintering into their chest. The blue hag suddenly cast a spell on the knights, turning them inside out and leaving them as a slop on the ground, while two of the knights were struck with the heavy halberds of the Tazinchian warriors. This led to the Tazinchians giving ground. Prince Tamen ordered his men to continue towards the holy warriors, with both his marauders and the Chosen of Khorne rushing forward. The Dragon Ogres once again met their foe in a battle with Lord Wood, standing alone against two of the beasts. In anger, the giant charged the archers on top of the roof, eager to get revenge on them. The Tazinchian warriors of chaos charged the Order's heavy cavalry, as lastly, the Knights of Filth charged the Grail Knights. The Dragon Ogres were too much for the humble lord of the Pink Swine. As they charged him, they quickly disarmed him before parting the lord from his life. The defender of Manispoke was no more. As the giant reached the roof of the house, he once again grabbed his enemies. He picked up 4 of the archers, throwing them across the battlefield. The archers were unable to return any form of damage before he slammed his great club on top of the peasants. This took out half of the building, forcing it to cave in. As the club was raised, only a single archer lived. He quickly fled for his life. The Tazinchians battled against the knights, with not a single wound on either side being dealt out. This was due to the exhaustion of all involved. The knights, in a shocking action, fled, knowing they never stood a chance. This was truly a shameful display. As the Knights of Filth charged the Grail Knights, once again, not a single warrior was killed, but due to the pure stench of the chaotic warriors of Nurgle, the Grail Knights chose to flee. As they did, they were quickly charged down by the Knights of Filth, leaving the Great Lord dead in the mud. For the first time in over 20 years, the Order of the Lady were left without a leader. A unit of newly pledged knights rode into the battlefield next, excited to earn their black robes in the name of the lady and her order. As this happened, to the shock of everyone, they saw their army's standard fleeing the battlefield. This was noted by the young pledgelings. A group of knights on foot wanted to regain the honour of the order before charging the Tazinchian sons of whores, eager to cut down the foes. The trebuchet once again aimed its weapon at the marauders, but once again it missed its target, their aim faltering due to fear. As the Knights of the Realm and the Tazinchian warriors faced off in combat, the halberds cut down a single knight. To the shock of the hag, the knights continued to pray, even as they fought their enemy. The hag ordered her men to retreat in a panic. As the Tzitzians fled, they were rallied due to the cries of their leader, Prince Tamen, while the Knights of Filth simply reformed to face the oncoming enemy. While it was too little, too late, more pledgling knights rode forth to join the battle and aid the defenders. The knights on foot charged the heavy Tzitzian infantry, eager to kill the Blue Hag, with the pledgelings charging the Knights of Filth, hoping to make a name for themselves in the order. Unfortunately, the knights on foot were unable to come to their aid and join them in the combat against these knights. The trebuchet had all but given up. It opened fire on the marauders once again, and in what could only be an example of comedy in engineering, they completely missed their enemy. The lady was not on their side this day. The knights of the order, in a brutal clanging of blade and halberd, killed a single Tzitzian warrior. The hag was weakened, Tzinch more or less abandoning her, leading to her being unable to take a life of a single man. Lastly, a halberdier killed a single knight of the order before the Chaos Heavy Infantry gave ground. As the Knights of Filth and the newly pledged knights met in battle, the pledgelings found they were quickly outmatched. The Knights of Filth killed the warriors outright, sacrificing their entrails to Grandfather Nurgle. And with that, the ruins of Manispoke were taken and sacked. The heretic, Prince Tamen, spent his night in celebration with his warriors, with the heads of all those who were slain displayed on the walls of the ruins. The Order of the Lady were now in a disarray, with the deaths of many of their men, along with their High Lord of the Order being slain in combat. The church would have to act quickly to elect a new leader for its army, a fact the prince knew all too well. He told his men, "Take the night in celebration, enjoy yourselves, have the ale by the gallon, the wine by the jug, as tomorrow we shall march on the Green Chapel, to the watchtower, we shall cross that bridge and take the order unprepared." With his goals set and his orders given, the prince was set to march on the only bridge that crossed the mainland from the Black River. He was to march on the chapel, take the bridge, and march forth to Hillsbury Keep. A task that, if he was successful, would likely lead to him winning this war. And with that, we would like to thank you for watching our video on the sacking of Manispoke. We hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. We will be bringing out a new lore video in the coming week, which will focus on the Lore of the Lady and also act as a prelude to our next battle report. We also have the new battle report coming soon. It has recently been filmed as well and will be edited soon. And with that, we'd like to thank you and look forward to you joining us next time at the Hall of Generals.